I must say, maybe I was in the minority. I was a little bit blindsided over the weekend when I saw Kieran McGeeney talking about a new championship structure, saying it's a joke. It is a joke. To vote in a system they voted out 2 years ago, it's a joke. I think it's an embarrassment. And my first thought was, wait, there's a new championship structure? Colm Keys was in Donegal Town at the weekend for Congress. Hi, Colm.
How do you? Joe, how are you?
I said, when did all this happen? So this was a rubber stamping of a kind of decision which was largely made some time ago,
That's it.
the sense. Hence there was no big week of build up to a do we want the new championship structure debate.
It's not like Proposal B of a few years ago when there was suspense that week as to how counties were voting. Nothing like that. Early last summer, GAA President Jarlath Burns led delegations around the country for consultation with counties and provinces in relation to a new championship format, because obviously there was some unease about the way the championship was going. Dead rubbers, not enough space on the calendar through May and June for teams to prepare. There was a week between the preliminary quarterfinals, All-Ireland quarterfinals, everything happening so quickly. So a new format was devised to replace the round robin. Obviously the provincial championships and the way the top 16 are formatted, the 8 provincial finalists, the 7 top league teams after that, and the Tailteann Cup winners will all be in Sam Maguire, top 16.
Yeah.
They will play off against each other. The winners, the 8 winners, will go into a winners group, and they will play off then in round 2A, as it will be called. And the winners of that go into a quarter-final. And then the losers, the 8 losers from the first round, will play off. And the winners of that losers group will play the losers of the winners group for the extra 4 quarter-final places. What it means is one less weekend on the calendar, which can probably create a gap between the last round and the All-Ireland quarterfinals to give all teams 2 weeks to prepare. Yeah. And it reduces the number of games from 28 to 20. It also rules out a Derry situation as we had last year, where they had lost a third championship game, beat Westmeath to get into a preliminary quarter-final against Mayo, and they won that to get into an All-Ireland quarter-final. So it's 2 strikes and you're out now.
Yeah.
That's quite clear the way the system is. Obviously, Kieran McGeeney won an All-Ireland under the old format. He's not going to be so happy. He's coming off the back of losing an 8-point lead. Yes, it's a lot of change, and that's not ideal. That is accepted. One of those changes, it's been 6 different formats in 9 years now. One of those was forced by COVID for 2 years. And then there was a COVID light, shall we say, when the Tailteann Cup was introduced in 2022 for the first time. There was no round robin groups. It was just straight knockout through the qualifiers. So the old format, then the Super 8s, then COVID, then that hybrid format.
Yeah.
The round robin groups, and now this new format. I think this is here to stay for a while. I think there'll be a few years in this. And I think the next big move will be to deal with the provincial championships somewhere down the line.
So Jarlath Burns' tour last September obviously paid dividends. This was a 92.8% yes vote for this motion. So I mean, there was no real debate. We're on thin ice here with the listeners because these are dull things to go through. But if I have it right, to give the short version, because I haven't really even caught up with the current season, I have to be honest. I sort of am with McGeeney when COVID notwithstanding, 6 in 9. It's a lot. So basically the big difference as of next year as opposed to this season, the round robin's gone.
Yeah.
So that business of the 16 teams, 4 groups of 4, where you played everybody once and the top 3 of the 4 went through. And the Derry example is
it's the lack of jeopardy.
Yeah.
The lack of jeopardy. It was the J word. It appears everywhere, but really there was too many safety nets.
I agree with that. The round robin wasn't particularly good.
Yeah.
So as you said, it's still going to be the same makeup of these 16 teams, the 8 provincial finalists, and then the top league finishers, and then the Tailteann Cup winner. That's our 16. So the 16 will be the same. So the quickest route through to a quarterfinal is if you just win 2 games in a row, you're in. Otherwise, as you said, there'll be 8 first round losers from those 8 games. They play each other to get down to 4, And then those 4 will play the batch who won their first game but had lost their second game. And that gets us our other 4, and then we're into quarterfinals.
Exactly.
So it'll be a bit brisker.
Yep.
As you
I said, 28 down to 20.
Yeah, more of a knockout quality.
Yes.
Games. Okay. I think I'm in favour of that too.
I think so. It's a bit of a journey to get there. Obviously, you have to trial the round robin and see how, in reality, it didn't work great. There was some excitement, obviously, around Armagh on a couple of occasions that they beat Galway and drew with them then to pip them twice to make the All-Ireland quarterfinals straight. So from that point of view, you had a lot of drama on the last day of last 2023 where Galway gave up that position and also Mayo gave up a position. So there was a lot of that,
and people
that
then
type
said,
of movement. The last day was great, but it was
people said
slow.
That saves it, that justifies it.
Yes, but the first 2 rounds were a little bit slow. I mean, you remember Dublin playing Kildare down in Nolan Park and the 7,000 or 8,000 or something like that. So it wasn't really capturing the imagination. I think supporters are very much designed to knock out.
Because I remember as well, I think it was the first year of it, and Mayo went down to Kerry and won in Killarney.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And then on Monday, what does all this mean? And it was like, oh, it doesn't mean anything. Kerry will be fine.
Mayo still finished third.
Yeah.
Mayo finished third in that group after beating Kerry in Killarney, their first defeat there since '95.
Yeah.
Mayo still finished third. They were caught by Cork in the last round, and they ended up in a preliminary quarter-final against Galway.
One of McGeeney's specifics was, he said, they're going to be coming out, the GAA that is, and saying all sorts of things, but this is just a money-saving exercise. Fewer games, less travelling, and they're going to try and push it out to all of us. I just think leave it alone. It was the best format ever. Money-saving?
Possibly. There is possibly a sense that there is a bit of rollback there. I mean, that is a very, very common theme in the GAA at the moment, is the size and the scale of the inter-county budgets. So by taking out that extra round of travel, shall we say, the bus journey, the overnight, maybe 2 overnights, the food, all of that possibly does save a little bit. Very minimal, but I think there's player load as well. There's just a little bit less, because you still have 7 league games. Obviously, the pre-season has been taken out of it, but there's a lot of activity, and again, it comes back to, and I'm sure it's a topic we will discuss now. It comes back to the definition of the amateur status and what that means and what that's about. And I think there's a desire to lessen the load on players, even with that small change. I don't think it's the primary reason. I think the main reason is more of a cutting edge to the games, and I think that probably provides it.
Well, my anecdotal sense of last year, and it'll be the same this year, talking to GAA fans and then the more casual sports fans who dip into the good GAA, was, who's playing this week?
Yeah.
And then by the time Monday you'd barely digested, it was like, oh God, there's another batch the next weekend. So there was just too much going on for people to follow, I felt.
Yeah, it's thick and fast. The games really came, I mean, there was obviously, it's probably over 4 weekends that all these games were taking place. Within about 5 weekends, there might be a break in between. You also have hurling at the same time. You have All-Ireland quarterfinals on pretty much at the same weekend. In the middle of that, you had the provincial hurling finals. So it all just felt very compacted and congested, as the way the GAA calendar is anyway at the moment. So games don't breathe.
Because Jim McGuinness made the point, and it's tied in with McGeaney saying cost saving, but McGuinness was saying, well, for fans, it was a lot of games to be asking people to go to, you know?
And I think attendance has probably suffered to some degree. I mean, last year collectively, for all the games under the remit of, shall we say, Central Council, so that's everything bar the provinces, attendances were down 10% in overall. That's primarily football. Hurling did well, stayed above what it was. But the quality of the football and maybe the compact nature of the calendar, there was so much on, people said, no, just hold it there.
Yeah.
So by allowing it to breathe, certainly the quality of football is a primary reason. But I also think the calendar it was just so much thrown at supporters.
Let this be the last change, though. I mean, 6 and 9. I presume that is the mood there. Everybody's agreeing they've damaged the championship a bit with all the changes.
Yeah, 6 and 9 will qualify the COVID and the year after that, and the fact that it's primarily been 2. It's been the Super 8s, the All-Ireland quarter-final round robin, and it's been the round robin general round robin qualifiers. There was the old system, and now there's the new system. You could probably say the change is primarily 3, but yes, technically 6. This is 6.
Even let's be fair to them. COVID was COVID. Even 3, it's a big thing.
It's a lot.
You're messing with your structure. Like, it's a traditional thing. You want people to build up a momentum and a kind of I get into the rhythm of it.
Yeah, given that it didn't change until 2001 at all.
Yeah.
This is probably a 7th and maybe an 8th change, because there was a Tommy Murphy Cup in there at one stage as well. So change over the last 25 years has been enormous in the Football Championship.
Yeah. And do you get the sense, though, ultimately there's a recognition, these changes, they're good and everything, but we're still just dancing around the provincials?
I think so. But I think the provincials now, after this, and because it's 6 and 9, I don't think there will be anything touching the provincial championships for a few years now. I think no more than your own sentiment there, and you've captured it well, to say enough is enough. Just leave it settle and leave it breed now. I don't think we'll see any change now, maybe even for up to a decade. I can't see anything why they would. Obviously, the provincial championships, if they were going to be changed, they would have been changed a few years ago. They probably will get a bit better in the years to come, possibly. So I think they'll be left on their own. I think this format will stick for, I'd give it 5 years before there's any even talk about change.
Got a whole 5 years.
Yeah.
Jarlath Burns, orator that he is, made a speech. You said focused in on demographics and money when he spoke to the Congress.
Well, demographics, Joe, was a presentation early on Saturday morning. Very interesting, and it probably goes over a lot of people's heads the way. And this is the population shift and how the GAA are dealing with it, and really not through their own fault being left behind with it. And very significant, it captures it well. It was a map that was put up which shows just a sliver down the east coast from just above Belfast down to Wexford, and it's highlighted there. Half the population of the island lives within that sliver along the east coast, yet only 18.6% of the GAA's clubs. There's 1,610 clubs. 18.6% of those clubs are within that area. So 18.6% of the GAA clubs are catering for 50% of the population. So it's coming down the tracks fast. The GAA was set up very much, and the club structure, as a rural organisation. But even more than 50 years ago, the much vaunted McNamee Commission that looked at every aspect, it was the strategic report of its time in 1971, looked at it and says, you know, the GAA is getting stronger where it's weakest, in other words, the urban areas, and getting weaker where it's strongest. And that's still applying now. Now, the remedy is more clubs in these urban areas, but new GAA clubs are hard to set up. People do not want to change clubs. They just go to the strongest club. And the man driving this demographics analysis is the Tyrone Central Council delegate, Benny Hurl, who gave a very good presentation about it. And he described it basically, and has described it consistently, as catastrophic. So,
in what way?
In terms of rural clubs with cannot field teams,
Yeah.
there's mergers, there's alliances. They're going to have to react to it in terms of eligibility, maybe cross-county competitions, smaller sided games. And then in the urban areas, there just isn't the land. If you have the super clubs, and you look around the M50 ring in Dublin, and the scale and size of the clubs there, Coola, Kilmacud Crokes, even Ballantyre, Ballyboden, self-styled biggest club, most teams going in any sports club. Where do they accommodate all the people coming through their gates?
Has it got to a stage yet with those super clubs whereby they're having to turn people away?
I don't know whether they're turning people away, but there's a funnel in every club. With all the underage teams, the funnel gets, it obviously comes to a point at adult level where, we're creating more teams, but they're getting further and further away from the top echelon of their club. So they're down playing in much lower divisions. And at that stage, human nature being what it is, they start to lose interest. Whereas if they're on the first or second team in a smaller club, they're more engaged. Naturally, they're more engaged. So I think there will be efforts to try and spread the load in Dublin a little bit more. It's not every club in Dublin is thriving, and far from it. And land is such a big issue. We think of Dublin being, having all the riches and all the spoils. But they're scrambling every weekend to look for pitches, normally council pitches. They're looking for just patches of ground to play their games on. It's a real challenge for Dublin. Obviously, with Spawell and Hollystown coming on stream over the next decade, it'll certainly alleviate the problem. but land a big problem. Land a big problem in that 18.6% of clubs and people everywhere else.
And did the presentation advocate, in an ideal world, if land was available, if money was there to get it, we just more clubs in Dublin required?
More clubs, but certainly more efforts to try and encourage people to stop driving by clubs to get to better clubs.
Well, you're not going to change that.
You're not going to change that unless you adopt some form of parish or area rule in Dublin where they can't do that. Once you're within 2 or 3 mile or something like that, some kind of gradient like that only allows you to travel so far to a club. That may be a solution. It'd be a very hard solution. It removes that choice for people. I mean, everybody wants to go to a club that they feel will suit their kids best. That's not in their area, and that does happen. But it may be something at some level they will have to legislate for.
Well, that'll be fascinating. As for rural depopulation, unfortunately, GAA fits into just wider demographics in the country. There are all sorts of issues being caused as a result of the migration east. I don't see any easy solution there.
No, there's not. It means mergers. It means that so many clubs have just invested money in facilities that just aren't getting the proper use. It's happening in Clare, Mayo, parts of Kerry, everywhere where there are mergers and clubs and teams coming together to form underage teams. I think that's going to happen into the future. And yes, I probably do in parts of Midlands Ireland. I see more cross-county leagues and to try and cater and accommodate for the teams there, because they just don't have enough.
We'll blitz through a few things. Motion 3. I read this led to spirited debate before ultimately being withdrawn and not passing. So there were 2 aspects to Motion 3 in particular. One was All-Ireland final day. If it's a draw, leave it at that. Let's come back for a replay. And so Cork, not surprisingly, who were beaten in the All-Ireland hurling final last year, following extra time, they were happy. They were like, this seems like a good one to us. So that one didn't go through. And the other one was then that provincial finals won't go to penalties. And it was interesting that Donegal, who obviously were the victors last year in the Ulster football final, they were in favour of not having penalties. Mary Coughlin spoke and said it's not the way to fix a provincial decider. On the All-Ireland final one, what provincial, I'm agnostic enough. I'm so with them on an All-Ireland final. I just think when 2 teams go at it, at the end of that Cork-Clare game, that was the perfect example to everyone, I think, of, no, they've been both exceptional here. Let them have a week or two's grace and we'll go again.
Yeah, this will fly through. It was because the 2 motions were together and there was an issue with the provincial hurling final element to it. A lot of hurling or provincial final element to it. A lot of hurling counties spoke out cautiously about it because it would probably mean an extra week for the champions. Chances are there'll be no provincial final replay required. It's very unlikely in a hurling game that there would be many after extra time that there would be cause for a replay, but it would require an extra week in the calendar just in case.
Okay.
So that would leave it an extra week for the champions to wait around for an All-Ireland semi-final. Not ideal. So that concern was there.
Okay.
It was suggested, well, maybe separate, have no hurling final replay, go straight to penalties, but have it in football. Be an unusual solution. Probably wouldn't sit easily, but one that was actually floated by Director General Tom Ryan. There'll be no question there'll be All-Ireland hurling and football final replays, if required, at the end of full time in 2026. That's just a matter of separating the motions.
And the provincial situation.
And it'll be decided at special Congress with all the other rule changes being written in permanently in October.
Okay, so that's a no-brainer. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Of course, who wouldn't want to have seen Cork and Clare go at it again 2 weeks later? And there's a sense that at the back end of the calendar, well, it's really only going to impact, if it does happen, it's only going to impact 2 counties who are participating. Just adapt your structures for this particular year. And that's it.
The lads will have to postpone their trip to Ionapa, but they'll kick it on a week.
They actually, they'll have to start speaking to the media, but to get the money to get to Ionapa or wherever else, if it's a team holiday, because that's a provision that Jarlath Burns put into his. It was part of his speech actually. He mentioned last year's All Ireland semi-finals that in hurling that for the 2 week build-up there was not one voice from any of the participants in the national media. There may have been at local level, wouldn't be sure about that. So there was no engagement. So he's now proposing to link measured media access to the Team Holiday Fund, which I thought was an interesting proposition in his speech. Not a motion or a rule or anything, but something that they are considering. Because this year the All-Ireland finalists got 150,000
For the holiday.
for the holiday, which was probably a little bit less than double. It used to be 80,000. So there was a lot of money has gone into the team holiday funds from the GAA at central level and provincial level. But Jarlath Burns wants to link it to better media access around All-Ireland launches and All-Ireland playoff games, say from quarterfinals to finals.
That is very shrewd, because obviously when any time this issue comes up, the point is quickly made. They're not professional. There's no obligation. So here's a way.
No, there's not. But if they want to access central funds, they will have to show more of themselves.
So now, instead of I'm just here so I don't get fined, it's I'm just here so I can go on holiday.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Jeez, Burns is busy, isn't he?
He is busy. He really, really is busy.
He really is.
He has hit the ground running and is still running, whether people like it or not. And obviously there'll be mixed opinions about that. But he is busy and he is very, very active.
I think in the main people do like it.
They do. I think so.
Yeah, I think
obviously
it's
some
popular.
people, there's some issues that will bring some adversity. But he is so on top of it.
Yeah, the Gallagher one was divisive, but other than that, I think everyone's...
I think so. Who can argue about the work of the FRC? Obviously, there'll be little nuances and things like that people don't like. But broadly speaking, it's well on its way to changing the game for the better.
Yeah. Will they change the remit that, like, if you're a really, really good president, you get a second term?
Donald Trump. I don't think so.
It'll be a loss, though. Like, it'll feel a little bit kind
Very
of...
hard act to follow.
The dynamism.
I mean,
will go.
his communication is just superb. Everything. On Friday night, he brought in the Brown family. The family of Sean Brown, the Balahi chairman who was murdered by loyalists. Gave a wonderful speech in
There's
introducing them.
an investigation
They're
reopened.
looking for
there.
a public inquiry,
Yes.
and a couple of High Court judges have advocated for it. So yes, it must happen, but the Secretary of State in Britain is opposing it. And one of the daughters, Claire Loughran, spoke and addressed Congress, asking why are we being punished like that. So it was a very poignant address and something very different. But obviously, Jarlath being from Armagh, he's very much strong thought association between matters up there, and even one part of his post-Congress briefing was very, very stern criticism of the Minister for Sport in the North, Gordon Lyons, who has been stalling any development around Casement Park, and he was very, very critical, expressed very serious disappointment in the performance of a government minister up there.
That Brown family situation is just dire. Isn't that the case where the RUC, on arrival to the family home after the murder of an innocent man, said to one of the daughters, "Why all the tears?"
And there was also 25, they estimate, and this was referenced on Friday night, 25 estimated state agents were involved at some level in collusion in that concealment.
I can imagine that was powerful on Friday. So there was an interesting motion which ultimately was withdrawn. Liam Griffin brought it forward. In effect, he wanted to make it mandatory. Really interesting one, this. Liam Griffin said, if you're a GAA club, it is mandatory for you to have hurling teams between under 7 and under 10. Now, he withdrew that, ultimately saying, look, I'm happy for the Hurling Development Committee to take the lead on the matter. But he questioned what Michael Cusack would make of the GAA now in his opening remarks. He said, hurling has fallen out of the top 10 sports in the country in the last 10 years. Only 2% of the population is playing hurling. So again, he withdrew and he said, OK, over to you, Hurling Development Committee. I mean, it would be kind of like taking a fairly blunt instrument to the problem. Under 7, under 10, you have to have a hurling team. I dare say Liam would probably argue quite convincingly it needs a fairly blunt instrument at this stage.
I would think so, and he didn't. He was pressed, maybe would he withdraw the fine element for this last week. His motion through his club, St Mary's in Rosslare, advocated for a €250 fine for a club for a year when they don't bring this in, and that would double every year after that. So that would probably focus minds. Having said that, this motion was before Congress 2 years ago, and I remember I was struck by it actually. There wasn't a bit of debate on it. Nothing. It was just voted and it lost the vote. But it got enough to come back within the 3 years. And now under the Jarlath Burns presidency, it's got a much, much warmer embrace because Jarlath has set up the Hurling Development Committee under the chair of Terry Riley from Antrim. And they're already busy. They've already installed William Maher as a hurling director.
Yeah, Will spoke to him a couple of episodes back if you want to check it out.
That's right. And they have launched these starter packs for hurling, for new hurling clubs, and apparently have been inundated by clubs looking for them. So the motion was withdrawn in the spirit. Jarlath Burns himself said, I would have voted for this. I had to drive so far to bring my kids to play hurling up in Armagh. He said, if this motion went, I would have voted for it. But it was taken very much in the spirit. And I think Liam Griffin, who's one of the great evangelists, obviously, of hurling, it was embraced and taken in spirit almost. That I think it was passed by acclaim is the word.
Okay.
So it was embraced and it's been put into the gift, and very much what the Hurling Development Committee are working towards. Maybe more carrot than stick, I think, to try and encourage. But I think there is a lot of interest. And I mean, hugely significant result at the weekend, Joe, was Donegal beating Kerry in the National Hurling League. Kerry aren't one of the stellar teams, but they're strong.
It's a tradition.
They're a very strong Joe McDonagh Cup team. So for Donegal to beat them, I think it was the first Munster team they actually played in, I don't know how long it is. I read it somewhere that it's that long. So a very significant result. Jarlath Burns did say that football was the biggest enemy to hurling, not anything else. That the power of football, obviously, that can act in reverse in hurling counties. I'm sure there are those in Kilkenny and Waterford who would see the exact opposite.
Well, neither wants to dilute their stronger.
But I think there's fertile ground there for hurling to grow.
I would have. I don't know what I would have guessed actually. What would I have guessed? But if you'd said to me what percentage of the population on the island play hurling, I would have thought 10. 2.
I would have thought more. 2%. That was Sheffield Hallam report, probably 10 or 15 years ago. But it's one that Liam Griffin quotes regularly. It was commissioned by the Sports Council, and yes, hurling had dropped out of the top 10.
Yeah. Was there much talk of this? It didn't really capture the imagination overly, but I thought it was interesting that Danesfort and Kilkenny proposed that GAA clubs would allow other sports and community groups to use their facilities.
Yeah.
Now, it got a majority of 52%, but it needs to hit 60, of course, to pass. So 47% of people there said, nah.
Yeah, that was ancillary facilities. So ancillary facilities are what are smaller sized AstroTurf pitches, ball walls, gyms, halls.
Yeah.
Now, as it is at the moment, a lot of clubs do rent out their facilities. Those facilities, obviously, there's blind eyes turned and rent. Okay. So this formalised it. This put it on a better footing. And there was quite a bit of support for it. But again, there was an intervention from the president who spoke on this himself, gave his own personal point of view, or maybe a presidential point of view, that with integration coming down the line, clubs engaging or being tied over with contracts to other sports or organisations for facilities, when more facilities are really going to be needed to accommodate fairly, equitably ladies football teams and camogie, that this may not be the best move.
Okay, interesting.
And I think it was enough to probably, but I'm not sure, Joe, that people really understand that it was ancillary facility. It was not green grass, and it was not your full-sized AstroTurf pitches that were at stake. That was my understanding of it. I didn't feel it was made very clear to the delegates that this was just those facilities. I thought there was a bit of ambiguity there myself, but I understood ancillary facilities to be those that I listed.
When is integration due to happen, or is there a date yet?
2 years, 2027. So that was announced last year. The president of the LGFA and Camogie Association both addressed Congress on Friday night.
Oh, right. I didn't
the first time.
see that.
Obviously, with a view to 2027. Both were fine presentations, but there is a nagging doubt that this isn't moving fast and it's proving difficult, and that 2027 will be hard to realise in its entirety. There will be integration, and already there's integration. There's integration among clubs in the one club model, and obviously at the top through Croke Park and maybe even the provinces, there will be integrated units and departments there. But at county board level, it is proving difficult.
Okay. And what's going to be the toughest issue?
I think finances, fixtures. Fixtures will be really difficult. Obviously finances too. I'd say there's a lot of county boards would be reluctant to share the pot. I think in reality that would be true. They're looking at extraordinary bills for their intercounty teams at the moment. And if integration being truly what it is, and there's equality there, same budgets will have to apply, even though they probably won't get at that. But in theory they will have, and in practice they will have to apply equally. So now, I can't imagine that ladies' coaching and backroom team will command as much as maybe some of the men's teams. But in time, it could get up to that. So there's a fear there that there's not enough. But I think fixtures, finance, and obviously rule books, it's just a labyrinth, really, to bring all the rule books together.
Yeah. I guess you're surrounded up there by GAA people for the weekend. What's the word on the new football rules? Is there general approval, would you say?
I'd say general approval. Yeah, I think obviously there's issues, Joe, around certain things. Is the 2 point? Yeah, I was looking at Kerry and Tyrone last Sunday. David Clifford scored his second ever senior hat-trick. And you look at the power he had to generate in the shots, the agility, the speed of thought, speed of movement, to get shots away in Pomeroy on a wet, windy day, and the skill of that to score his second hat-trick. And Tyrone were able to float 4 2-pointers to almost erase the value of Clifford's great work inside. 4 2-pointers from a bit of distance with a bit of wind suitable. And those 3 magic moments were almost cancelled out. And I think there's an imbalance there. And I think the 4-point goal has to be back on the agenda this week when the FRC are meeting. They're meeting later in the week. I think they met last night as well online, as they do. So I think the 4-point goal has to be back on if the 2-pointer is to be retained. Otherwise, go back to the 3 and 1. That's obviously, that'd be a big jump from where we are now. But I think there's just an imbalance there between the goals. And you look at it in the context of Clifford, and that's what really struck me. Obviously, I think the 3-up structure, when there's a black card and red carded player off, when there's a player off, I think they'll address that. That's an easy fix. Yeah. Just leave it, punish the team if the player's off. I don't think they saw that was an unintended consequence. The goalkeeper's still a big one, really is.
People don't like it.
It's not that they don't like it. I think I think everyone realises that it's just extending those possession chains that were a problem that led to the evolution of the FRC in the first place. This is what brought them about. It was those long, laborious. They're not as bad. Nowhere near as bad. The ball is transferred much quicker. And I think ultimately the test is on the terrace. And I mentioned this morning. Aaron Kernan, at the launch of GAAGO, I think it was December 2023, was speaking. He says, he said, I went down part of a 7,000 Armagh delegation to our support to Tralee. And all we did was talk on the terrace as the ball was played around. I think people are more engaged now. They're not talking about other things. They're talking about what's in front of them. It's a very broad, basic test, but I think it's accurate.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens with the keeper thing, but I think in the main it's a much better product. I don't even think that's in doubt at the moment. I take your point.
It is. I mean,
4-point
it is.
goal.
What is it there? 60-70% there, I would say. There are obviously changes and big decisions to be made.
Because the logic on the 4-point goal in those not sandbox games, maybe they were sandbox games, but the ones we saw on TV anyway was there'll be some real hammerings with the 4-point goal.
That's a structure thing, isn't it?
That's going to happen anyway.
Yeah,
there'll be hammerings anyway.
Yeah, and it's a structure thing. If you have a weak team against a strong team, there'll be hammerings. That's it. Yeah. So it's to have merit-based competitions and leagues and groups.
Last one, and geez, when you just flick through this, is just a random Tuesday. This organisation changes so quickly. It has a reputation for not changing quickly. It's the most ill-fitting.
Well, I actually have found in Congress over the last number of years that delegations are very, very open and amenable
Yeah.
to change, especially around structures and especially around rule changes.
So GAAGO is going to be GAA Plus, and it will have no RTE stake whatsoever.
Yeah, that was announced again during Jarlath Burns' speech. A logo came up, the new GA Plus.
Did they have like Declan McBennett's face and like a red circle and a line across it? Was that?
Well, actually, Jarlath Burns did name check Declan McBennett and the Director General Kevin Backhurst afterwards and say that the separation and division is amicable and they've been great partners over many years, not just for GAAGO, but obviously going back to the coverage of the games for a long, long time. This is a reset. I think GAAGO probably became a bit toxic in that month of May or that early part of May when a big Munster Championship game went behind the paywall, and that's not going to change. People are still going to be geeking. Just set your clock for early May. Now, obviously, Cork Limerick is not going to be behind it. The schedule has not been announced, but so by and large that's a Sunday afternoon game, and that's going to be available to everybody. But they're very intent on expanding the portfolio of content, midweek shows, all of that. There's a new studio being equipped in the old Elvery store just at the press entrance there, the main entrance to Croke Park.
Very good.
That's going to be the GA Plus studio. So they are looking towards expansion. Obviously, within the terms of the current contract, they have tiers 5 and 6, levels 5 and 6, the packages, which gives them the All-Ireland football quarterfinals on a Saturday night, and that'll be contentious. And whether it's GAAGO or GA Plus, people are going to give out about that.
I guess this takes away the justifiable-ish concern over a conflict of interest from an RTE point of view.
Yeah, I think it probably had to go that way. And, obviously they've been involved in getting it up and running, but I think there had to be a degree of separation. Everybody realised that.
Colm Keys of the Irish Independent, of course. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.